programming principles. So I'm always trying to go back to like, what's the foundation? What are the principles that ultimately are guiding decision making? Because really, training is decision making. It is monitoring stress imposed, and then seeing if we're getting the results that we want. Are people reaching their goals? Are they getting fitter? Are they getting stronger? Are they improving their performance in sports? Or is their overarching body composition changing, right? We have to figure out, like, are we doing the right things to get the results we want, right? So creating structure so that we can move in the direction of our goals is key, and these are the principles that I try to use to move that way. So the first and foremost thing we want to do is start with the end in mind. This is like one of the foundational principles of a lot of things in life, actually, is like, start to think about what you actually want and then orient yourself to moving in those directions over time. The more we can dial in someone's goals and their current level of where they're at, the more we know like how to actually set up the week or the training cycle to get them moving in the right direction, right? So we want to know, hey, where do you want to go? And then where are you at? If you're, a high level runner and you want to make the Boston Marathon, okay, we have an end point and we have like your starting point. If you are somebody who has never ran a marathon, the starting point is very different and the timeline is going to change as well. So we're kind of thinking about, where are you at? What are your goals? And then we want to try to create a appropriate timeline. Like for somebody who's not really a marathon runner, if they want to make the Boston Marathon, like it might be a 10, 15 year journey if it's at all possible, right? The next thing is just to think about, okay, like what are the considerations for how we're going to program for people when it comes to as far as like, are you a 20-year-old basketball player or a 45-year-old mom? Like there's going to be differences in the program they run. But it's less that the principles really change, and it's just more about specifics of how we approach their unique situations. So deciding on like the physical qualities to emphasize is, important. But there's also things we can just kind of narrow down, right? Like, how much cardiovascular endurance is needed for the task, or just their health, right? Sometimes you see people get really, really oriented towards like powerlifting, and they sacrifice their cardiovascular endurance, and that actually comes at the expense of their health and their overarching conditioning and their overarching recovery, right? So there's really only like 5 really big buckets to kind of consider. They're endurance, strength, force production, mobility, flexibility, the ability to move and control our strength is a good way to think about that one. How fast we can do something, power both in output and in just the impulse that we create when we strike the ground or we do something fast. And then just kind of skills like coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy, right? So there's, again, this interplay of like capacities to bring up and then skills to work on. Again, they kind of, is your squat a skill or is it a capacity? Or is like, well, your ability to squat with really good technique is a skill you develop, but it's also dependent on the capacity of your muscles to produce force, right? So there's always this interplay going on. It's never quite simple or perfect, but it is just a good way to start to think about some of this stuff. I like the capacity and skill framework because it kind of emphasizes that, like, yeah, you got to practice. This is going to take time. People often get bogged down in stuff, and it's like these are skills that take time. I saw a post not too long ago. It's like lifting weights and training is the only like physical thing people kind of do where it's like they expect the results super, super quickly. Where like nobody in soccer thinks that they're gonna, perform really, really high level, really, really fast, right? Or nobody thinks that they're gonna be able to just do amazing things in tennis really, really fast. Yes, there's like, we want to get better quickly, and that's not a bad thing. But it's also just like the physical adaptations of training often take a while. So these are kind of the things to always consider, and that's just the general adaptation syndrome, right? SAID principle, which is specific adaptation to imposed demands, and then just progressive challenge. You want to think about like the human, right? You want to think about the specific thing you're working on, and then you want to think about how do we keep upping the dose of challenge to drive progress, but also how do we just let the body respond and the body and mind respond so that then we can increase the challenge when they're ready for it. It's often better to think about, I don't want to just push challenge on people. I want them to do the work and then be ready for the next challenge, right? This is a really simple model. It's just called the stimulus organism response model. And it's essentially like, hey, we're going to give a stimulus to somebody. We're going to have them train this amount, right? And there's going to be, like, we have to consider, like, okay, who's that person? What's their prior training history, right? What are they already good at? What are their weaknesses? Like, there's all these things that we need to kind of consider. We don't have to consider everything, though, all the time anyway. And then there's going to be response. And then we just go back through that loop again, right? So super simple model, but it can be really helpful to just kind of think about, okay, I'm trying to impose some general things on people, which is more work, specific work, right? Like, hey, we're going to get better at squats. We're going to do more squats, right? We're going to add the load. We're going to basically challenge you in different ways. And then see how people are responding to it. And then figure out how to up the dose of stress when they're ready for it. I really just like to come back to, like, let's win the week. Meaning, like, let's have a plan for the long term. Like, you know, the microcycle is the week-long period. The mesocycle is like 4 to 8 to 12 weeks of, like, this phase. The macrocycles are in months and years. Like, in a lot of ways, those things kind of break down when you, like, look at physiology. But for, like, human organization and just planning, they work really well. The more concrete someone has, like, goals in their mind and maybe can plan out the year, the more we can kind of work backwards and lay out, like, the training process so that it makes sense and we don't, like, continuously beat people up or make them train too hard or anything like that. But it's still a guess, and we still want to address training stress, like, regularly. Like, you see this a lot where, you know, people will be out of season and they'll have, like, this build up where they're training hard, and then they're going to get back into more skills practice for, like, their sports season. You still want to keep physical training going on. You just don't necessarily have the luxury of it being, like, a really neat process. Like, if they have games 3 times a week and you're trying to get in lifting sessions, it's like you might have to greatly modify those things and just, like, work on keeping people healthy, right? So a lot of times, like, these really perfect and clear-cut plans break down. Again, that's not bad. We just have to be able to modify the stress we're imposing on people so that they can actually recover from both their sport and their training or just their life, and then keep going. So, again, going back to the weekly structure, we just want to get clear on the number of days people have available to train and what looks like a good amount of work for that person. You can get a lot of good effects by basically thinking of, like, training as, like, the week as this pie, you know, that you then create slices of. If somebody only wants to train 3 times a week and they have these goals, we're going to divide that pie into 3 sections, right? If they want to train 5 days or 6 days a week, we're going to divide that pie of stress into 6 sections, right? Then there's all sorts of individual considerations, but, you know, most of the stuff isn't perfect. It's just trying to be practical and help people get the amount of work done that they can to move in the direction of their goals and then perform well. You know, so then we want to just think about, okay, how long can they be in the gym? A lot of people, it's like 45 minutes. Like, 45 minutes is what I've found to be, like, the sweet spot for a lot of people. Now, up to 90 minutes is where a lot of, like, powerlifters kind of live. People, though, there's too many people in the gym for, like, 2 or 3 hours trying to do, like, a ton of really hard training multiple times a week. I think there is this level of, unless you're getting paid to do this stuff or you're a professional athlete or you're very much in, like, this competitive mode, I think it's burning people out, right? And a lot of that is just imposed on people by, like, fitness culture. Then we want to prioritize around the goals, around, you know, what things seem to be necessary for people to reach those goals. We want to allow for recovery. And then we want to manage, like, the short term while thinking long term. And this is why I like the week, again, because the week is, like, something we can consistently assess if we're moving in the right direction and make course corrections. If you make a really long block of training, again, it could work, but a lot of times you're having to modify based on travel, based on people's work, based on just all sorts of things, sickness, XYZ, right? And then just identify preferences, like, and we'll talk more about that as we go here. So we want to think about the dose of stress imposed. This is not going to be perfect. This is a pendulum swinging back and forth from too much to not enough. Dye's envelope of function, which I think I used in the last lecture on just principles of training and what is training is a really good way to think about it, because there's this threshold where that wasn't enough work to drive adaptation, and then there's this higher level threshold where that's too much work. It's actually causing people to break down, get hurt, not feel good. And in between there's this level of, this is a good amount of stress, right? We're assessing those things via subjective report and objective performance, right? If performance starts to deteriorate, we're probably stressing somebody too much. And if they're feeling really run down and ragged, there's a lot of things psychosocially in effect there, but we're probably needing to manage some things. It's better to start easy than to dig a giant hole that you have to figure out how to get out of. People love to crush themselves in the name of like, I want to train really hard, but it's generally better to let the stuff work. It just get a good dose of stress and let it work on you, so that then you have to increase the stress when you're ready for it. And then finally, thoughts, beliefs, and environment and expectations are powerful. So how people view the stuff they're doing can really have big effects. So these are just some examples of training splits and styles. Honestly, these are just packages for delivering stress. They're based on people's preferences and how people have organized things in the past. So one really simple thing is just like a linear progression style. This is made popular by like Starting Strength, Mark Rippetoe. Basically, it's like you do a very similar workout 3 times a week or 2 to 3 times a week, and you just let that workout, like the variable you change is you just put more weight on the bar. This can work for a lot of people when they get technically proficient, and it's a good way to like kind of get somebody a lot of practice, but it also like burns people out because they try to keep doing it for a long period of time. I've done this. It works, but it makes you feel broken when you don't get to a certain level that some guy who was perfectly suited for this style of training got, right? Upper lower splits, 2 days of upper body, 2 days of lower body. Again, these are just packages, right? Full body, 2 to 4 days of combination of upper and lower. I'll show a little bit more of that shortly. Heavy, light, medium is just a way to organize the stress. So you might be doing a heavy squat and a light bench press and some accessories. You might be doing a light deadlift and a heavy upper body press. And then you might be doing a light or medium squat and heavy like single leg hinge. Like, it's just a way to start to categorize things. High low is high stress day, and then a low stress day, and then a high stress day, and then a low stress day, and then a high stress day. 5 days a week. This is really good for like athletic training or just getting like managing the stress on somebody. That can look like sprints and plyometrics as a high stress day. Low stress, like armor building day, like a hypertrophy day. A high stress, basically like lower body strength session, right? A low stress cardiovascular day, and then like a high stress upper body day, or something like that. There's a lot of ways to organize this stuff. And then bro splits are like back and bi, chest and tri, legs and core. Again, all of this stuff is just organization. Can we handle it is really the big question to ask over time. So principles, progression, preferences. I kind of looked at this as like this Venn diagram. You know, we have these preferences. People like to train in certain ways. That's okay. Sometimes they're going to need to change those preferences if they want to get their goals, but again, it's okay. We need to utilize principles, said principles, stress, recovery, adaptation, progressive overload, etc. Like, these are really like the guiding like lines to effective training. And then progression is like what we are training for measurable. Is there a qualitative component? So this is kind of like the objective and the subjective, the work capacity and the skill stuff. You know, are we getting better over time? And if we're kind of, you know, getting into this middle, that's the sweet spot. We're like doing good training, right? And that's really powerful, and that's what a lot of this is about. So just always go back to principles, progression, and preferences. All right, so this is Cherylanda, kind of example number 1 here. She's a 33-year-old woman who wants to run 5 to 10Ks, improve strength, and manage being a mom, right? She's had left hip pain from like an athletic career. She notes it with longer distances, deep squat. Sometimes it just gets irritated. She's a training history from former collegiate basketball player. She's experienced in the weight room, but like it's not really standardized. We need to assess her technique, but she knows what she's doing. She knows her way around, right? She likes to get to the gym 3 days a week for 45 minutes and do 2 runs a week. So preferences, right? Super cool. It also alludes to like what she maybe has time for. She wants to decrease her hip pain, run a 5K in 23 minutes, deadlift 225, and do chin-ups. Cool. We have some specific things to chase. So this is just an example of maybe how we could organize her training. Again, I don't want this to be like strict or rigid. It's just how do we start to organize this stuff for her. Some day one, kind of I like to do just kind of organize and do like full body days. Because worst comes to worst, like people miss or they get they miss a couple days or they go on vacation or work gets busy. You got like a full body stimulus in like a couple times. Sometimes people's life gets crazy near the end of the week and they never hit their leg day session, right? So there's just one reason I like to do this, and we can still like add in. We could make this first day like lower stress. Like you can kind of blend some of those styles of training together, right? But we're doing warm-ups, we're doing a main squat, we're doing an overhead press variation, some secondary hinging, and then chin-ups, right? Day two is like a low-stress outdoor run, and potentially some intervals inside of that run or before that run, and some plyos, right? So she's doing this run after some intervals and some plyos, right? Rest day on day three. Again, this could be training and then you create a rest day. We're just trying to see if the people can adapt to the stresses imposed, right? Warm up on day four, like some skills practice, doing some chins. Then we're going to do a heavy deadlift. We're going to bench press. We're going to do a secondary squat. And we're going to do trunk. So this is kind of like that's a challenging day. But again, if we just manage the overarching stress and it doesn't seem like it's overwhelming to her, we'll probably be okay. Day five, this is more of like a lower body kind of accessory day. This sometimes just gets people to do stuff that if we tried to add it on to these other days, it may not work. Again, just trying to manage the stress. Day six is longer run. This is something like, mile repeats or, a 60-minute just go as long as you want, easy type of thing. I like fartleks for people, just like, hey, inside of this 30-minute run, do some faster intervals. There's a lot of ways to program this. We just want to get people out, get them running, let them just practice the skill of running by running more, right? And then day seven is rest. So we want to assess the performance, keep the load similar and see if we're getting stronger, or we just want to undulate things with little tweaks. So one thing to remember is like people do like variety. Sometimes the simplest way to manage variety is just to create like reps and sets that keep us basically practicing the same skill without changing a ton of variables, without changing exercises all the time. So one way I like to do this, and you can figure out like how you like to do it, but it's just essentially doing like descending or ascending reps. So like a week one is 8 reps at RPE 6, 8 reps at RPE 7, 8 reps at RPE 8, right? So we're progressing. They're learning to add some weight to the bar and feel it out. They also get better at like auto-regulating using RPE, reps in reserve type of thing. Again, week 2, we go to 6 reps for that same structure. Week 3, we go to 4 reps. Again, it's enough variety that people can start to like, they get that hit of like, oh, okay, this was a little different, right? People also want to feel like things are changing, which that is change, but it's not crazy change, right? You can also do like 3 sets of 8 at RPE 7, 3 sets of 6 at RPE 7, 3 sets of 4 at RPE 7. One of the things about that is like when you do kind of a progressive system, the way I did it in the first rate, it gives people kind of the ability to play around with the weight. People often, again, this is more about learning to use RPE than like it being perfect, but people will often like they'll undershoot and overshoot like doing 3 sets of 8 at RP 7, and they won't adjust the weight on the bar, so they'll actually be doing RP 8 or they'll be doing RP 6. Again, it's not the end of the world. They just need to show up and practice consistently. Finally, you can also just do like 3 sets of 8 at RP 6, 3 sets of 8 at RP 7, 3 sets of 8 at RP 8 in a wave, like a weekly wave type of setting. Again, we're just trying to add a little bit of challenge over time, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. So we want to create test and retest. She's 33 years old. We're squatting 10 rep max, noting hip symptoms if she has them. We want to take in like an intake, like a subjective examination or a subjective conversation is really powerful here. But it really then boils down to like, let's just create some easy tests to establish a baseline. And then we're just week to week monitoring response. How's she feeling? How's she performing? Are things getting better? If things are getting better, we're in good spot. Ride this out for a while until she gets bored. If she's not getting better, then we need to make some changes, right? At least, especially like after a couple weeks of things not improving, right? Sometimes you just got to let the training work. So when people set a goal to do something in like 12 weeks, that's great. We start to have, then we can create this endpoint for the current dose of training. You can kind of create a little bit more of a macro cycle. I don't think you have to change from the week to week structure. You just have to realize we're going to taper off some of the training as we get closer and closer to like performing the goal. So again, if she wants to run a 5K, we're going to do some form of 5K baseline testing, or we're going to look at her current performances and kind of see where she's at, right? Again, we might tweak the weekly structure. We might add a little bit more running if she wants to get faster at certain, like, you know, her mile or some intervals inside there. If she wants to go to a track day, we might take out a lifting session, move some pieces around, and then create a little bit more running specific training. We can create more specific benchmarks. Like we could have her do a mile test. We could have her do, you know, like 5K assessment every few weeks at like a standardized rate of perceived exertion. We can kind of figure out ways to manage that. Then we want to just get specific. So do we need to increase her running? Does she want to increase her running? And then do we need to decrease the lifting to just facilitate that? Or can we keep things mostly the same? Is she responding well? Is she feeling good about what she's doing? And she doesn't necessarily want to go down this, I need to do more specific type of route. Michael. So Michael's a 25-year-old powerlifter. His goals are to squat 550, bench 345, deadlift 600 plus. I think I put it there. Yeah, he's got a history of low back pain and right shoulder pain. He lifted in high school. He started powerlifting 3 years ago. He prefers upper-lower splits. He neglects cardio. He's very powerlifting-centric in his training, and he spends 60 to 90 minutes in the gym. He works as a software engineer, so he's kind of, that gives us a general, like, okay, what's his, what, we don't know everything, but that might be just his, he's not really doing a whole lot of moving during the day, and he wants to get better and compete at the national level, right? So for weekly training, you can look at this more and more if you want, but like we're gonna kind of abide by his desires here and have like an upper lower split. I'm gonna inject some cardio into his routine in the form of warm-ups. I'm going to kind of make things powerlifting centric, like have more of a volume day and then have some intensity work. We're going to just hit a good amount of accessories to help round out his strength. But also we might train a little bit more generally. A lot of people come with these very specific things that they've been doing, and it kind of beats them up. And they need more just a general base of athleticism for periods of time. They have to kind of buy into that, but it often just keeps people healthier. And we can use variations of the big lifts to do that as well. But then we want to just assess if, like, hey, are you liking this? Are you feeling good? You know, and some of it when they're coming to you with like back pain or shoulder pain, like just by the nature of variety and slightly decreased loading, they're going to start to feel better. Michael sets a goal to compete in a powerlifting meet in 16 weeks. So we baseline test, we look at his numbers, we assess the weekly structure. Do we need to make a change? Do we need to get more specific? Can he tolerate getting more specific? Do we need to regularly assess his weekly performance? We need to like look back and see if things are getting stronger month after month. The cool thing about like powerlifting is like, you know, they have these specific goals, and like it's hard because there's always going to be these waves of training, but like you can kind of tell if we're moving in the right direction over the course of months and years, right? Are you not getting hurt? Are your totals getting better? Are you technically improving via the nature of practice? A lot of times when people are more like general fitness, it's like we got to kind of figure out what they really care about. But powerlifters typically just want to lift heavy. Then we want to, as we're getting closer to the meet, maybe get more specific. You know, decrease some of the accessory movements, or at least the number of sets we're doing. Just try to decrease and manage the stress so that he can peak as he needs to for his competition. And that's it. That's an overview of just programming. It's not everything, but it hopefully just gives insight into how to start thinking about this stuff, and then create your own system. Really, that's the big goal, is create your own system. Think about stress, think about organization, and then start to play around with what people like to do and how you can make things work for anybody you're going to program for. Peace.